Welcome to the Football Retro Podcast.
The word welcome, I guess, is stretching it a little when you're an Australian in a place like this today.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Football Retro Podcast. I am your host, Johnny, and I am joined once again today by Darcy and Akram. How you doing, guys?
Great, Johnny. Always a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Yeah, guys, really excited. What a great topic to start with. And Real Madrid's on a roll for the rest of the season. So me and Darcy are super happy.
Yeah, football's coming thick and fast with it now since back from the COVID lockdown.
Every day is a new match.
At the time of recording, can I say unfortunately, Liverpool has won the title.
Then now they can say it is their year.
About time.
For 30 years.
Unfortunate for the non-Liverpool fans that will have to hear about this for the next 20 years. So, yeah, Real Madrid also fighting head-to-head with Barcelona. Interesting times ahead.
Yeah, the football coming thick and fast. Games every 3 or 4 days. They're trying to finish off the season as quick as they can. Yeah, there's only going to be more football, which is good for us.
Awesome. So today's topic, we wanted to have a bit of a different discussion today and talk about strikers, more specifically the number 9. The number 9 role, or yes, a striker. So obviously it's a very targeted position. It's a very famous position because they are the money makers. And even at a youth level or coming into the professional level, you know that a striker is going to make more money than a defender or a centre mid. Right? It's where the spotlight is the, I want to say the most important role, because there is no most important role on a pitch, but it's where the newspaper headlines go to, because they're the match winners. So we all have different views of what a striker is or what a 9 is. According to you guys, what is a 9?
When I think of number 9, I think goals. I think of the one player that the team relies on to win titles. The one that the rest of the 10 or 9 players in the team look to get the wins, to get the titles, and the ones that get the fans up on their feet celebrating. And it's just goals, pretty much, for me.
Akram?
Yeah, like for me, I think of the same kind of things. Like, it's definitely the position that has the most spotlight, especially over the years. But we're talking about versus attackers versus the number 9. So when I think about the number 9 role, I think a physical, strong guy, someone who's going to hold up play, who's going to definitely score. A guy who's not necessarily going to be the most technically gifted, but a guy who is going to be the spear of your attack.
So they have to be tall and strong to be a 9?
Well, like we're going to get into it about how the number 9 role has evolved. But essentially, that is what you typically think of when you think about the number 9 role, and so we'll talk about how that's changed over modern eras.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think you have to say number 9 equals goal scorer. Number 9 equals the guy that you go to, that you look for, the ones that make the difference when winning a title or fighting for a title. The game winners that turn into championship winners. In regards to qualities, they can be fast, they can be strong. For example, let me throw a name out there and tell me if to you it's a 9 or more of a forward. Someone like Saviola. And the reason why I say that name is because, like you mentioned, tall and strong. This guy is neither of the above. Michael Owen, similar plays to a certain extent. Would you consider them a 9?
I mean, definitely I would consider them a 9. But that's, once again, it goes against, there's always an exception to a rule. Some players like Michael Owen, he was a natural goal scorer, fast, athletic, wasn't exactly, 6'2", able to hit, master of the header. But, like I said, that's an exception to the rule. When you think about the number 9, especially from the 90s and retreating backwards into the 80s and 70s, the number 9 was definitely a guy who was a little bit more physical, who wasn't going to be the most technically gifted. But that's where the modern era has become so exciting with a player like Michael Owen. That's why he got so many applauded so fast, because this was a guy who was a great goal scorer that actually possessed qualities like a winger, like a number 10, someone who was technical, who was fast, who was athletic, and who could move really well and could score goals.
Yeah, I think, look, like you mentioned before, the number 9 has to be tall, strong. No, not necessarily. Like I said, Michael Owen and Saviola, shorter type players, smaller build, but they had the other qualities, and that suited the team that they played with very well. And you had Owen and Saviola who were shorter in frame, but then their strike partner could be someone who had that tall in height, but and which gives our team options to either go through using speed and skill to get through like an Owen, and then have the other option of putting crosses in for a target man. So they complement each other in a way. So
I would argue though, like especially in the 90s, when you're talking about a player like a smaller player next to a bigger guy, the bigger guy is the number 9. That the target man is the 9. The player next to him is the second striker.
Becomes second striker.
Feeds off him in a way.
But that's a second striker. Alessandro Del Piero is a second striker to Filippo Inzaghi in the 90s, or David Trezeguet in the early 2000s. Gianluca Vialli is the 9 to Mancini's 10 or 7. It is a funny one because if you're a number 9, then what's the other guy? Is the other guy a 7? Well, 7's normally a left winger. 11 normally the right side.
So you're saying, and you're like a Nolan, for example, he won't be considered number 9 because he'd be playing as a second striker.
If you are putting the topic of discussion strictly between height, then yeah, you could. However, what the role that he was in the team was to finish off attacks. So that's, I think, also supersedes any other discussion about physical traits. Was he smaller than the average typical striker, especially in the 90s? I mean, the 90s was the guys of Batistuta, Vialli, Shearer. So when you're talking about Owen in terms of his physical attributes, it's superseded by the fact that his role was to be the scorer of the.
Yeah, look,
the way he gets the goals as well.
And we're speaking about Owen specifically, but I mentioned Saviola as well. Is he a 9?
Okay.
Let's look at today's game. Aguero is a classic 9 in the way that I wouldn't say classic, but he's played in that centre forward role.
Absolutely.
And as much as he's strong, he's not a tall bloke.
Absolutely.
No, he's stocky and big, but he's used his other abilities to get that got him the goals,
Absolutely. But then it's like, I think when you bring up players like Aguero, you are starting to discuss how that number and how that position's evolved. Mm-hmm. Because, there was a time where we were playing with 2 strikers up front every team. And that's really what we're talking about when you think about the number 9. As the future's gone on and there are more lone striker formations, that's when that number 9 role has changed.
So, looking at the attributes of a 9, and this might be a tough one to answer.
Mm-hmm.
In your preference, would you prefer someone with a good heading skill or someone that can shoot with both legs if you had to pick?
I mean, right now in this day and age, definitely the latter. It's someone who can score, who's a lot more technical, because that's the number 9 you need right now. You can't have a goal scorer who isn't too mobile. However, at the same time, I guess every team's different. A tactical setup's different. We saw in World Cup 2018, Oliver Giroud not score a goal and yet prove effective at being a target man to help bring the balls down to the midfield to then create goal scoring. When you have wingers like Mbappe and Griezmann who can, play behind him and feed off that target man.
Yeah, I think that means that the target man role has changed a lot. So they're pretty much there to lay off, to feed off the players behind him in the attack. So, yeah, it's changed a lot, I think, the number 9. So, like I said, Oliver Giroud as an example is prime.
Yeah, absolutely. But Johnny's asking, what would you prefer in this day and age?
To be honest, I think a player that can shoot with both legs, because that's where I see a lot of football's becoming very quick, a lot of counter-attacking, and I think you need to have that player that can have that ability to score goals anywhere from around the box or inside.
And I think both your answers complements where the game is going today. I mean, if 20 years ago, the answer would have been the other way around, I think.
100%.
Yeah, and I've got a name that comes to mind, which I will mention later.
And look, I think you mentioned that Akram about not having possibly not the best football ability, but being strong, physical, and scoring goals. It's also about positioning as well, and knowing where to go, where to stand, how to be. Because a lot of these goals may seem as tap-ins, or they may seem as poachers. Look, nothing fancy, But you see the stats and they keep scoring goals, and you think this guy's nothing special, but he keeps scoring goals. Like the name that comes to my mind is Martin Palermo. He played for Villarreal, he played at Boca, and he's big. He's very famous in Argentina, especially Boca, for scoring a lot of goals. And you look at his talent, and he's not the most agile player, but he scores headers, he scores goals, ridiculous goals, and like he just knows where to be. Yeah. It's a striker and a good number 9. He's a smart player also.
Oh, 100%. Like, I mean, Filippo Inzaghi is, for me, a classic guy, Johnny, where he didn't possess any physical or technical attribute that was outstanding besides his ability to position himself well and have fantastic instincts with where to be. And he made a career, some would argue like a Hall of Fame career, out of those attributes.
And you mentioned Filippo Inzaghi. So Alex Ferguson once said that he was born offside. Given that he was always in the right place at the right time, and he tended to always be borderline onside, offside, but he just happened to be there, right place at the right time. And that's the difference between a smart player and just a normal striker.
Yeah.
And I can think of other names as well, like a Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Yeah,
for example.
He's another name that comes to mind when I think of Palermo. Another player that you look at him and you think you're nothing special, and yet anywhere he goes, he keeps scoring goals. He kept scoring goals. Yeah.
He won titles. He won top goal scorer Real Madrid in his first year, and that's what I loved about him. Personally, Van Nistelrooy. Not only that, like he was great outside the box. He had scored some amazing goals, and he was all round. He was very good.
This is an interesting question, and something that I always ask myself when I watch highlights of important games in the past or even today. Do you think a 9 should take penalties? When you think about them living off goals, I think a 9, someone that's selfish, that wants goals, that the ultimate goal is scoring, shooting, finding goals. So naturally you think a 9 wants the penalty. A 9 lives off scoring goals. Yeah. And yet in a lot of cases, and I won't go further than Real Madrid today, where Ramos is taking penalties. You see defenders taking penalties. You see, and I look at the 9s, there's a lot of players where, defenders were also taking penalties, goalkeepers were taking penalties. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's true because, as a striker, your job is to score goals, and if you don't really want to take a penalty, then should you be a striker? That just gives... That just feeds off confidence to the rest of the team that, I'm up here, I'm ready, confident to take this penalty, and I'm to put this away in the back of the net. It's my job. That's how I see it.
100%. Like I really love that take, Johnny. Like that's not something I thought about until you brought it up, which was the role of the penalty taker. So the way I look at it is it's from different perspectives. As a coach, do you want your striker to take it, or do you want your best player to take it? With the thing with Ramos, well, look, how many goals has Ramos gone? How many penalties has he gone unmissed? I think it's around 20. I think it's around 20.
Yes,
the mark is around 20.
Especially ever since that penalty miss in 2012 in the shootout, we laid it over the bar. He just hasn't missed one. That do I remember.
So the way I look at it is, as a coach or as the president, I'm happy with that, and that you might have to sacrifice your striker's confidence for that. However, at the same time, what I hear from you, which I totally agree with, is a striker relies on confidence. He needs to see the ball in the back of the net, and a striker, their primary ability, especially their number 9, needs to be cool under pressure and be able to finish. If your striker isn't elite at penalties, and you're in an elite club, then there's a bit of a problem there.
And then that might feed off lack of confidence from the other team. If your striker doesn't want to take a penalty or is reluctant, and then they're thinking, hang on, should he be there? Yeah,
how does that conversation go in the dressing room where you go, look, you're the striker, your job is to score goals, but not in the ultimate pressure situation?
You'd feel kind of no confidence vote almost. That's what I see.
And it goes the other way around. If the striker doesn't want the penalties, how does the team feel about him?
And there's been a few famous incidents that's occurred. And what do you say?
I can think of one.
Yeah, what was that?
Nicolas Anelka, 2008 Champions League final. You can tell he didn't want to step up to take that penalty. He missed it, and then Man United went on to win the Champions League title. And you could tell from his face. You can tell from players' face when they're coming up to take a penalty. That
Terry slip.
Yeah, that's the one. That was on before. If he scored that, they would have won it. But Anelka, you could tell when you're stepping up, he didn't want to be there. And that's that confidence then goes away from the other two guys in your team are saying, hang on, why, are you a striker or are you not? We rely on you for goals. And
Yeah, that's right. Like it's a really interesting take. The role of the penalty taker these days.
No,
Anyway,
you're right. Look, and obviously we're here discussing the striker and the player specifically, and we'll probably get a bit on this a lot more in detail a bit later when we start discussing individual players. But what role does the team have to do with a striker? So what do I mean by that? Sometimes it's hard to judge an individual player because opportunities might come easier depending on the team they have around them. Not only formation or strategy or tactics, but just the team themselves. So it's hard to sometimes fall on the striker when the service is not there, or vice versa. Someone that gets a lot of service and not putting the goals away. So, do you guys know where I'm coming from?
yeah, absolutely. Because there has been a number of strikers where they've torn it up in certain leagues and then moved over to others and just not shined. And the question's always been, well, was it the club, was it the situation, or was it the league, the level of competition, the level of ability from the opposing defence? I do see where you're coming from. I think it really depends on the striker and what era you're talking about. If you're talking 1993, Alan Shearer, well, obviously his role was to score, and if he's not scoring, then that's an indictment on his ability in any given match. These days, though, don't mean to keep bringing up Olivier Giroud, but you can have a successful team and a successful tactical plan that's not built around your number 9 these days.
And I think you mentioned Giroud 20 years before that, France 98, when they won the World Cup. They had Stéphane Guivache.
That's right, yeah.
He didn't score a goal in the tournament and didn't look the part really from what I watched him in that World Cup, but they relied on such a solid, strong defence and a quality midfield to win them that World Cup.
Well, that's true.
And
There's one name that keeps coming to mind when we speak about this, and that's Falcao. So Falcao goes to Monaco and kills it, goes to Porto and kills it, Atletico kills it, goes into the Premier League and doesn't have a very successful career. Gets out of the Premier League and kills it again.
Goes back to killing it.
So,
that's something like that. That could be he just wasn't suited for the Premier League. But
what does that mean though? Like,
So when I think about what you're referring to in terms of styles, I think, Premier League's a lot faster, a little bit more rough.
Physical, yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes for strikers it's the timing issue.
Yeah.
Offsides, linking up with, passes from the midfield. Some leagues that tend to be a little slower, that you might just suit them more. And I also think about, where do you think about the position on the field that you get the most supply? So in the Premier League, I tend to think it's from overhead balls. I think it's from through balls that tend to be able to cut through the defense. Whereas in leagues like La Liga, where technique is a lot more prioritized, you can get passes from almost anywhere, and therefore your technique needs to be a lot more cleaner and tighter. The passes could come from very out wide, almost near the corner. There are a lot of players that tend to love to cut inside. You need to be just a little bit more swifter in terms of your reactions.
I think, like you mentioned the point about the Premier League, how they tend to be long ball focused, and in La Liga they tend to be possession based. I think that's the key. When you watch La Liga, they spend more time on the ball, playing the ball out, and that kind of has a different role that a striker has maybe in La Liga compared to in the Premier League.
to me, it's a classical way of viewing the leagues, and I think over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, the Premier League has evolved.
So you think it's a bit of an outdated take now?
5 years ago, I don't know if it's pre-Pep or whatever it is, but I think the Premier League has changed a lot in that regard. So I agree.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, for me, England was that. England was the long ball. England was the crosses. England was that.
Yeah.
I think with such an international influence on the game now, it's not even English anymore with the amount of international players they have in that league. I think it has changed to a more modern style football.
It's certainly true, and I don't want to argue with you about it because I don't think I can, because it is certainly true that many leagues have started to evolve. It's the same kind of thing as if you were to refer that the Serie A is defensive, where these days there are scoring records. Teams are playing much more attacking. So yeah, I definitely can understand where you're coming from with that point of view. I guess sometimes you have long-held biases, and so when I watch Premier League, there's like a confirmation bias where when I see it, I confirm something yet. Like, my
Yeah.
opinion's still there because that was the opinion going into that match. However, at the same time, these examples of players who didn't necessarily make it probably ring true when you're thinking about the past. I remember players like Mateja Kezman, who was really exciting playing in the Eredivisie. He went to Chelsea, right? And didn't really fulfill that promise.
And then his career then went downhill after Chelsea.
All right, so we spoke about a second striker.
Yeah.
Or that, look, a forward role without being that striker. Let's talk about that a little bit. So
Alright.
it's would you say it's supporting the main man or working together? Because I don't think it's supporting. It's not like in a movie where there's a main actor and a supporting actor, but it's more about playing together and feeding off each other and making each other work.
Well, yes and no. I see where you're coming from, and I definitely agree with you to an extent. However, at the same time, I will push back a little and say, though in the past, there were many times where the number 9 was considered the guy who was going to finish the move off. The second striker key role was to link the midfield to attack, especially there was not a number 10 floating around behind the striker, so the second striker had to play that role. However, the second striker also needed to be able to score. That's why there are some players that couldn't function there. Like, you wouldn't put Zinedine Zidane as a second striker, but
No.
Del Piero you can.
Yes.
Because of speed, agility, and etc. So that's where I kind of look at it, where you do have to fulfill both roles. Linking the midfield to the attack for that number 9, but at the same time being able to function yourself as a valuable offensive player.
Yeah, and one example I can think of, and if you might disagree with Raul.
No, Raul is a classic. I
was
totally
9.
agree.
Yeah, he's second striker. He started off as a midfielder, moved his way more forward, but he worked in tandem with Fernando Morientes for a number of years, but Raul pitched in with a lot of goals over the years. So he did his job as well, not just as Akram said, linking the midfield and attack, but also pitching in with the goal scoring duties too. And he did a great job of that.
See, when I think of this in partnerships with the 9, I think of Bergkamp.
Wow,
Partnering up with Henri.
Yeah, and that was another great one. They worked really well together at Arsenal, especially in the 04, the Invincibles season. And Bergkamp had that great holding the ball up ability, very skillful. Henri had that quickness. He could cut in, cut out. They worked really well together. That's a great example.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did he do it with Kluivert in the national team?
Yeah, France '98. They had that partnership together. They worked really well. Great to watch. Very unlucky not to go all the way to the final. Bergkamp and Kluivert.
And that's what that forward versus striker. That's the argument, and that's discussion that we're having here. Is what is a striker and what is a forward? And I think you summed it up well, Ak. And that's why someone like Maradona, for example, to me is not a striker. I know he wore the number 10 on the jersey, but a lot of the times where you wear on your jersey is not what you represent.
Yeah.
And you see the way he played the game as well. He wasn't always up front waiting for the ball or just playing with his strike partner. He was, you all know what Maradona was capable, what he did.
So since you mentioned that, we go back to the previous discussion. Is the number 9 always the last line or the ones that's fighting with the 2 centre backs? Is that what you see a number 9 as?
For the most part, especially historically.
Yeah.
I think we've started to enter an age where you can't argue that. I mean, we've had teams successfully where there's no striker. 4-6-0.
Or they pretty much play with wingers.
Yeah.
So, like a 4-3-3, and you have the wingers, and then maybe the last line.
But yeah, historically, I definitely think of the guy on the last line of defense, right? Like Darcy said about Pippo Inzaghi, always right there, trying to spring off the last line of defense before getting offside. Think about guys like that. I think to keep in mind with the points about Bergkamp and Henri and Arsenal was the beginning of that modern ability with football. Because Henri, I wouldn't classify him as the most classic number 9 the way you would classify Alan Shearer.
No.
Because he had tremendous technique. He was a very all-round forward who was capable of being a second striker and a primary striker. That's why that tandem works so beautifully. Because they both complemented each other so well. And yeah.
We mentioned Maradona. I think I want to bring a special mention to Cruyff as well.
100%.
Yeah.
He was never seen as a 9, but he was a forward.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I don't.
Attacking midfielder.
It was
forward.
always, up front, working in the attack, wasn't really known for his defensive work. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
well, I mean, the whole point of total football was that you had to show some form of defensive grit, so that when you did change positions, you were capable of it. But he clearly wasn't renowned for his defensive
He wasn't known
ability.
for that. No,
and especially him more than anyone else, because while the others were really fulfilling the role of total football, he was standing in the middle of the field conducting. Now, so you're totally spot on to bring him up, because a lot of people think that he was the original false nine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 100%. So he was the guy that would kind of float around, stay around in the center of the midfield and try to conduct it. I mean, there is video of him standing there pointing at players where to go before he would move. So that's Cruyff for you.
Yeah, the false nine is something we'll probably get into a little bit later. That's an interesting. Considering you're talking about nines.
Yeah.
It's happening a lot these days. A false nine too. That.
So would you consider, speaking of false nines, would you consider Messi a forward but not a striker?
Yes.
Yep, I agree. He's not known as a striker. No, he plays up front, but not like he waits for the ball to come to him.
Well, I also tend to classify Messi, the way I look at Messi was in two different roles. When he played on the right wing, I think of him as an inside forward, a guy who was primed to cut inside and attack the goal from that right-hand side, bringing his left foot into it. And as the false nine, when he played there for a few years with David Villa and Pedro and
Eto'o.
and the players like that.
Henry, Zlatan.
And things like that. But then obviously once Neymar and Suarez got into it, he moved back to that right wing role.
Okay, so looking at the evolution of the role, it's a little bit hard to speak about the evolution of the role without mentioning the evolution of formations. And I want to start with the 90s and the classic 4-4-2. With the 4-4-2, let me ask you this. We spoke about having a forward and a striker, or having a supportive striker. Can you play, and I'm guessing this comes down to taste and the coach, but can you play with two nines?
You can. One team that would come to mind that had two strikers that are very similar were Brazil in the sort of late 90s with Ronaldo and Romario. They were, similar qualities, goal poachers, very quick, not that tall, not that, but the way they played, they were very similar. And then, they scored lots of goals, and, one wasn't a target man. None of them were like target men as such. So, that's when it worked. That's the last time I remember when it worked, but I can't think much of where else.
I think I see your point, because they were both classified as number nines, or both classified as strikers. But Ronaldo could do everything on the field, mate. Like he would dribble, he had technique.
Oh, I'm just saying,
above any.
I'm just saying the way they played the game together, Ronaldo and Romario, they were very similar in the way.
And they were both pure goal scorers.
Yeah.
The team I think about is the 2003 or 2004 AC Milan with Shevchenko and Filippo Inzaghi. Both players were more renowned for being poachers. Shevchenko had an amazing shot. However, at the same time, he didn't possess the most tremendous technique. They relied on their midfield. They relied on Clarence Seedorf, Rui Costa to bring them into the game. You can do it, but that means you really need to believe wholeheartedly in that midfield's ability to bring them in. Yeah.
The one that comes to mind for me is the 0-2. Not a formation, but playing with two strikers is 0-2 Argentina squad. When you had Batistuta and Crespo up front to play together.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Bielsa played them together up front.
Yeah.
Look, it didn't work well. It didn't work out very well in the World Cup, but it did work out very well in the qualifiers.
I did. Yeah.
100%. I think
they cruised through that.
I think to link to what you're referring to in terms of the 4-4-2, like obviously AC Milan didn't play a 4-4-2 with Shevchenko and Inzaghi. Yeah. I don't think you can play a 4-4-2 with two classic nines. I think they need to be more in the role of what Adasi.
It does depend on your midfield, but
it does. But a 4-4-2, two centre mids, two left and right mid. If you have two strikers that don't possess the physical traits that Adasi was referring to with Romario and Ronaldo, or the technical traits, then it makes it very hard to link that midfield to the attack.
Those two are one of a kind, and I still think,
especially Ronaldo.
I still think to this day, what if Romario was fit for the 98 World Cup, with him and Ronaldo up front in France 98, they could have gone on and actually won the tournament.
If they were both fit.
Exactly. But you're saying,
Yeah.
if they were together, man, God, that was a great partnership.
Yeah, especially R9. Like,
Yeah.
what a player! He possessed
Yeah.
every quality that you
Yeah.
could ever ask for in a goal scorer.
Anyway, that's another. Well, we can only hope. Well, imagine what it would have been.
But I think when you're talking about two strikers that don't necessarily possess that kind of god level ability,
You're not going to find many. Of
I
that.
do think
You
you need more of a number 10 right behind him to bring him in. You need wingers who are you need really elite wingers to bring him in, fullbacks to be throwing those crosses in, that kind of stuff. That's why it would be really difficult in a 4-4-2. I'm thinking about Robbie Fowler and Michael Owen though, because
early
Fowler-
2000s.
Yeah, well, Fowler was definitely a strong striker, but I guess Owen did possess enough technical ability to help Lincoln link the midfield to attack, and their midfield was pretty
It
strong.
was very quick. Yeah.
What about the Dwight York and Cole?
That was a good one. They were.
That's a very good
they were-
point,
They were, yeah, good point because they were very similar. They were
Absolutely.
great goal
No.
scorers.
Are you saying they're similar because they're black? That's racist, Darcy.
100%. Like, I think that is the best example. I think because you're referring to the same formation with that strike partnership.
Yeah.
I would argue that you did have Scholes, you did have Giggs, and you did have your favourite player, mate, David Beckham. Just put in elite service as he always does.
Yep.
What a
Crossing it
special
from
player
the
that
right.
got. What a special player that was, a Darcy.
Overrated.
Seriously,
He was good.
would you think better than Messi? Come on, mate.
Oh, don't make me angry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let's move on.
I think
from
he'll kick us off this podcast if we say anything.
Look, from the 4-4-2, I feel like there was a shift, and we moved on to the 3-5-2.
Yeah.
So the early 2000s.
Brazil.
I don't know if Bielsa was the main corporate behind that, but there was a 3-5-2 shift. Or I even remember here in Australia playing at a 3-5-2 formation. Like, it was influenced worldwide. Once again, it's the two strikers up front, so you can have the two tanks or the two nines, or you can have the one big nine with a forward, with a supporting striker.
100%. And I think that's how it would work. Like, let's say if you had the two tanks, hypothetically, you would then need to rely on that right and left mid to really do a lot of work. And I think that's why you have that third midfielder in there to hopefully link that midfielder to attack. Because I would find those two number 9s very lonely without someone really creative to help pull the strings.
Well, let me ask you, the 02 World Cup, Brazil, did they play 3-5-2?
They did.
So Cafu, Roberto Carlos to wingers.
Wing backs, yeah.
Was it Ronaldo and Rivaldo up front with Ronaldinho behind them?
Yeah, those three, yeah. So Ronaldo.
Okay.
and Ronaldo.
So in that case, Rivaldo would be the supporting striker. Because Rivaldo is definitely not a number 9.
He wasn't a target
No,
man or
absolutely.
such. So yeah, we could see him. He wasn't. He was always in between Ronaldo and Ronaldinho in that kind of.
Absolutely, and they probably all moved around and shift positions a little as well because, like we said, all three of them possess such amazing technique, athleticism, speed that they could all help fulfill each role simultaneously between a number 10, a support striker, and the goal scorer.
From the 3-5-2, I feel like we shifted to the 4-3-1-2.
Yep.
Yep. So we had that 4 solid backs. You had that defensive mid with the 2 guys next to them.
Yep.
That middle man and the 2 strikers up front.
Yeah.
Once again, 2 strikers up front.
I'm very partial to the 2 striker formations.
Yeah.
I always that's something that I guess because we grew up on, I'm very biased. I love 2 striker formations, especially the 4-3-1-2 or like the 4-1-2-1-2 where you have more of a specialized central defensive midfielder, like an anchor man. Claude Makaleli, shout out. Yeah. But anyway, what I really enjoyed by it is, and I can see elements of why it's useful if ever played today, because you would have that middle central midfielder, maybe more inclined to stay back, 2 centre mids who were just charged, to be, the engine of it. Then you would have a great, hopefully, a great number 10 to link those 2 strikers up. And if one of your strikers could pass and dribble, all the better.
So we spoke about influences before you jump in at Darcy.
Yeah.
We spoke about coaches' influences, and we can't just say it's because of this coach that this formation became popular. But it makes you think about certain coaches. 4-4-2 for me, Sir Alex Ferguson is the one that sort of made it popular with his success. 3-5-2, I feel like Bielsa had a big part to play. 4-3-1-2, I think Mourinho with Porto and with Chelsea was the one that sort of made it so popular. Would you disagree?
With Mourinho, at Real Madrid, he was popular with the 4-2-3-1, so the double pivot in the midfield, and then
Yeah.
the three attackers.
Which is a little bit
then-
similar.
Similar, yeah.
Which is
he
similar.
was very big on that,
Yeah.
I think, with Mourinho.
Um, But I'm talking about Mourinho, Porto, and his first years at Chelsea.
yeah.
So I'm talking about 5 years before that.
Yeah.
About 04, 05.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
So that's where this formation was big.
Yeah.
I know this because my team in Argentina, Vélez, in 05 won it with this formation.
Yeah.
So I know it's very popular. And the 4-3-1, the one is sort of the connector, the number 10 role that we call
In Gancha.
Enganche. Yeah. So the Riquelme role.
Yeah, 100%.
What they call him, the last 10. So, so you had the two strikers, and then from there, and that's what we talk about Mourinho now. That 2010, the 28 to 08, 9. I feel like that's when the 4-3-3 started to come in.
He did use that a lot, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the big influences for that were both Guardiola and Klopp, especially Guardiola.
Yeah, 100%.
With the success, once again, the 4-3-3, and that's where we are sort of getting out of now slowly.
And I think Zidane as well. He's used that a lot.
Yeah.
He's
using it now, but like that's
he's
post
part of
influence.
his success, yeah.
I think Mourinho brought in that late 2000 period. I think he brought in that 4-2-3-1, where you had the double pivot, and then and once again you're showing a shift and change with that number 9 role. But then what you're referring to is that move into the 4-3-3, which really took us up till now. It's been such a dominant formation because of its flexibility and its creativity.
Flexibility, but it depends how the coaches use it as well, because
100%.
you may be depending on the players you have, you may be depending on the 1-9, and that's where I'm going with this. Talking about 9s,
Yeah,
and the 4-3-3 on paper has 1-9,
yeah.
so a lot of your goals are dependent on the 1-9.
I mean, historically, yes, but as we saw during that period of time, that's when that role wasn't as important anymore. That's when the role became more of a linking position, more of a player to help bring other players into the attack. So that's when was it 09 that they debuted Messi as a false 9?
Yeah.
Yes.
When we had Eto'o and Henri.
Well, that was more like 2007, 2008?
Now I think I'm talking about a bit after.
You reckon? 2010?
2010 had Bertone Barsi. We got
Yeah,
that
Barca.
Zlatan came in, and then he was the kind of like.
Look,
the
I'm not
type-
going to argue against your memory. I've lost against.
because they changed. Yeah, they had a few changes in those 3 years. That's all.
Yeah, they did start to move around. Zlatan only stayed for a year, and then
Didn't work out.
That didn't work out.
But yeah,
all that.
Messi as a false 9 just goes to show how much the 9 has evolved.
Oh
in
yeah,
that role.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
I think with Messi, the way he plays the game, you don't think of him as a number 9.
No.
That's the only thing. Like,
And look, and you think today, the 9s that come to mind, the people like Suarez, Lewandowski, or those ones.
Well, that's the thing. Is like I think number 9s today are have to be much more well-rounded
Not just
than
goal poachers, pretty much.
strikers
Yeah.
from the past. Yeah, not just goal poachers. Like Karim Benzema, Luis Suarez, Lewandowski. While they're all quite good at scoring goals, especially Lewandowski, all three of them possess a lot of technical ability. You can't be you can't be a negative when it comes to that, especially if you play in La Liga, especially if you play for Barcelona. You certainly need to be a much more well-rounded striker than that. Which it goes to show why Zlatan didn't do so well, because for a guy of his size, he does possess tremendous technique.
It's a special personality, that guy, and we'll talk about him, I'm sure.
Yeah, he didn't get along with Pep.
I'm sure he'll come up.
There's a lot to it.
A little bit. A little bit later. Look, the other formation that comes to mind, and we touched on a little bit, is the Cruyff with total football, and that was the 1-3-3-3. With a sweeper role, and with the flexibility of all the players, the other 9 players there, with, like we spoke about, Cruyff dropping back, Niskens replacing him up front. That's the other only formation that comes to mind that stands out, influencing the number 9 role anyway.
So the influence of the number 9 role, the total football was such a unique thing that occurred, leading up to that 70s period and after. No one had really succeeded with total football the way the Dutch did. I think that you didn't see any kind of representation of total football up until Cruyff took over for Barcelona, and then until Pep Guardiola came in for Barcelona in the late 2000s. The number 9 role there, I don't know how much influence you could consider it, especially when you go into the 80s and 90s, which is the real period of decade where for the large strikers, large goal scorers that we're referring to, you know. So, but at the same time, like, I do think it brought a lot of attention to the second striker and to creating the concept of a guy who can score, but who's also capable of linking play, passing the ball, dribbling and possessing great technique. And obviously that's what Cruyff was able to do.
Speaking of Cruyff, do we know what formation he played with as a coach? His dream team, his Barcelona dream team.
So he played the 3-4-3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it a 3-4-3 diamond?
I think it was a diamond, yeah. I think.
Yeah.
It's a Guardiola as the
holding midfielder, yeah.
At the back, you had Ronald Koeman at the back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which was another...
Stoichkov up front.
Stoichkov up front. And, so, like, he definitely implemented parts of that total football philosophy in that formation. Very fantastic formation. I believe there was an anecdote where when he first showed his players what they were going to play, they were like, what the hell is that? They've never seen anyone play with that kind of formation before.
Fair enough. All right, let's touch on individual players.
Interesting.
This is the fun part.
Yeah.
Look, it's going to be hard, obviously, making a ranking or top 5 or top 6 when you're looking at out of all time number 9s. But I'm going to throw some names at you, and you just tell me whether you think it's a 9 and what you think of them.
Okay.
I think the most obvious choice, and the number 1 striker that stands out for me across all times, that keeps coming back in argument, is Pele.
Okay.
What do you think?
Darcy?
It's an interesting one because Pele, he scored a ton of goals, but I think he had more to him than just that. I think the way he played the game, I think he was more than a 9. I thought he'd more like a 10 in a way, given that the way he played, move around the ball, the skill he had. But I think if you want to judge just based on the amount of goals he scored, then I can see why you're saying he's a number 9. But I don't know, I'm going to say, I wouldn't really consider him more of a forward.
So not a 9.
Not a striker as such.
Yeah.
A forward.
Look, I think when you think about players of that caliber, Pele, Maradona, Cruyff, they really kind of go beyond the limitations of any positional role. They did pretty much everything. They linked play, they passed the ball, they dribbled around guys. They definitely scored a lot of goals. So I'm inclined to agree with Darcy. I don't consider him a classic 9. Like I said, the classic 9 has a very specific set of traits, especially from that 70s, 80s, 90s era. And so I look at Pele in a different way. But at the same time, like I said, players like Maradona, Pele, Di Stefano was his jersey was a 9, but he certainly didn't play like a 9. He had a lot more. He had a lot more hand in terms of involving the play, and he at times he looked like he was playing as a central midfielder. I tend to agree with Darcy. Pele forward.
Eusebio.
Eusebio was what a talent! What a very unique talent. I'm not sure, man. I would probably be inclined to agree that he was a forward because he possessed such an amazing technique, especially on the ball, and his athleticism. Darcy, what do you reckon, man? Forward or 9?
I'd say 9.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Just from what I saw of him, the way he played the game, they looked to him for the goals as the main man.
A real focal point.
Yeah, focal point for Portugal, particularly in the 1966 World Cup where he led Portugal to the semi-finals. And then, just the way I think I saw him play, the way the team saw him as a focal point. I think he's a 9. Pure 9.
Look, as a Golden Boot winner, over and over again, and a main focus, just because he's agile, different ability, I don't think it takes away from him being a striker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
So it brings me to my next point, Puskas.
Puskas is a funny one, mate, because of the formation they played. It was a very unique formation they played. It was like a 3-2-5 kind of formation.
Just attack.
I mean, in 1968, you would have Gento on the left, Copa on the right. you would have Hector Rio in the center of midfield, and then you would have Di Stefano, Puskás, and then Santa Maria as the point of the attack, who was the real number 9. I think Puskás would be more of a second striker. He was a bigger guy, as we all know. He was about 6'4", 6'1", so he definitely falls in line with that stereotypical number 9. But he did so much more than score goals. He just was great at everything.
Yeah, I mean, his record, you look at it, you think, yeah, goals, number 9. But yeah, I think, as Akram said, he had more to his game than just being up front, a target man. He did a lot more helping the midfield and attack. And I think I'll call him as a forward. And
as we've discussed, we've put names out there, and we've talked about players like Messi. You're capable of scoring plenty of goals, but from different positions of the field. Doesn't necessarily mean you're exactly a striker. Puskás was probably more of a second striker. But, man, like I said, when you come to players of that caliber, who knows, man? They just did everything.
So this was going to be a very quick one. I think we all agree. Ronaldo.
R9, mate.
R9? R9 is a 9.
Yeah, but
surely
that people don't think of CR7. But,
no, I'm talking about R9.
Yeah, but he definitely number 9 striker.
R9 is a 9? Yes or no?
Yeah, I think so.
I think you can't argue against that one. I think he's the iconic number 9.
He could do it all, man. It's just a shame with those injuries.
This is an interesting one. Baggio.
No.
He's a forward?
Forward.
To be honest, he's a forward. I would think of more of as a classic 10.
Well, you think of that goal he scored in the 1990 World Cup, where he gets the ball from behind, like from his own half, and so he comes in deep to get the ball. He's not a classic 9, but he's a forward.
He complemented the striker. Yeah, I think well.
Absolutely, definitely, that's easy.
The next two are pretty easy as well because of everything we've been talking about being strong, about attributes. The next two I want to mention are both Batistuta and Shearer.
Yeah.
So they're the most classical 9s you can think of when you're thinking about ability-wise. They're not people who have skills or who are agile, but they have a lot of strength, a lot of drive, shooting from anywhere, heading the ball, scoring penalties. Your classic 9s. Yeah,
you touched on them, and they had those attributes you mentioned. And I was leading up to this podcast, I was making a list of all these great number 9s that I remember, and the ones I think of straight away, Batistuta and Shearer in the 90s, man, they were so good at what they do, complemented the team very well, scored goals wherever they went. Just amazing talent, just pure strikers.
There's something so much fun about a classic striker, though. Yeah. Like those great memories of like Batistuta just smashing goals in from all around the field, and that's what it's a funny one. Definitely agree. Classic 9, both of them, totally to the highest degree of what you would consider it. But I got to tell you, man, that sometimes there's so many fond memories of those guys being goal scorers, mate.
Yeah. Would you include Viduka in that list?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a 9.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, Gerd Müller.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, mate, the bomber. Come on, mate. This guy, he invented what number 9s are.
And had the record for most goals scored in the World Cup until Ronaldo broke that.
He had the most goals scored in one season until Messi broke that as well, not long ago. So for him to hold the record for that long, he must have done something right in the 70s. All right, Romario.
Great night. Even though he's number 11 on his back, he was a great goal poacher. Not big in size, but man, he could get into the box so quick, anytime, anywhere.
So let me ask you. You mentioned 98 before, where he and Ronaldo were together as 2 9s. In the 94, was Bebeto the second striker to Romario, or was Bebeto a 9 himself?
It's a good question, actually. I'd say it was Romario complementing Bebeto.
Wow.
I think, from what I remember, I think it was Romario, like more the second striker with Bebeto.
Yeah.
From when we watched the games back then and seeing how Romario played, I'd say Bebeto was more head forward, and then Romario just behind him.
Which is what makes the conversation so fun and kind of difficult to nail down. Because for every example, whether you're using physical traits, goal scoring records, you always have arguments with players that are the exception to those rules. That's why, like, Ronaldo and Romario as 2 number 9s in World Cup '98, that concept is a strike duo that had everything. And in '94, I think you're right. He played probably more as a second striker.
Yeah.
Van Basten.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Van Basten if you didn't. Look, it's a funny one. I think of him more as a forward, but
I think. So you think of him as a forward because of his. You look at him physically, and he doesn't scream out 9. And you think of Van Basten, you think of a classy player.
Oh, absolutely. He was 6'2". He had a tremendous jumping ability, but at the same time, mate, when you're talking about some of these legends, it's so hard to nail down because you wouldn't necessarily say that Van Basten was lacking in the technique department.
Yeah.
He didn't really have a habit of dribbling past too many players or bringing the ball from deep. That was more other players' roles, especially Ruud Gullit. But at the same time, you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I would think of him as number 9.
Does it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, like I said, wasn't known for his dribbling or skills, getting past players, but man, could he finish?
Yeah.
And he was like, you could see like some of the goals he scored. He'll be kind of viewed as a target man. Like that bicycle he scored for Ajax, I think it was 70s or 80s, and then that volley for Holland.
The 88 final.
88 final against the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like he possessed so many more qualities beyond the role, but I guess for the most of his career, his position was for him to be the last guy on the line, to hang out right at the end, to be that classic number 9 striker.
He could finish that guy.
Di Stefano we touched on, I think would be similar to Puskás.
Yeah.
Henri, I know we mentioned him before.
Oh, boy.
I know it's hard to say, and you mentioned Akram, he's got the ability to be both a 9 and a supporting
Player.
striker.
Yeah, I think he...
But traditionally in the Premier League, I think you think of him as a 9.
Yeah, I think he started off as a winger.
Yeah.
I think with Monaco, and then at Juventus as well as a winger, but didn't work out. And then he went to Arsenal, and then he'd still have that ability where he'd cut in from the left or right, and as a winger. But then I think you see him more as a target, as a number 9, as the years went by with Arsenal. I think,
it's
the amount of goals he scored.
It's like you said, he could play both, but for the most point of his career, he was played as that number 9. You certainly wouldn't argue that Bergkamp was the more advanced of the two.
Yeah.
At the same time, what a well-rounded player. You're right. He did play winger for Juventus. He ended up going back and playing winger for Barcelona too, a lot more successfully than when he played for Juventus. So it goes to show that all-round ability he had, the technique, and he could have played any position around that front 3 positions, wing, striker.
Yeah. Look, I think I just want to mention Zlatan because of his personality more than anything. He's a classic 9 according to the way he plays and style he plays. Is he up there with the names of Ronaldo and the other guys we're speaking of? Possibly not, but the personality himself is worth a mention.
He's definitely got a character on him, that's for sure. But,
I think that when you were referring to before about the character of a number 9, he definitely embodies that uber confidence you need to be a great number 9.
Yeah.
That's as much as I can say nicely about Zlatan Ibrahimovic.
You guys are going to disagree with me on this one.
Okay.
But I like Cristiano as a 9.
Oh, no. I really do too, especially because I always find that a player that he plays on the inside forward position, like Ronaldo was at the left wing, or like a player like Messi, while they do need to be responsible for goal scoring, they also have to help bring the ball into play a little bit more. And sometimes I felt that Ronaldo neglected that duty when he played on the left wing. I think it was too goal oriented when he wasn't necessarily the only goal scorer on the field, when his role wasn't the number 9. As he's moved centrally, I feel like it suits him more because, then that is his one and truly role.
And that's what I mean. He's one bloke that cares more about him scoring than the team scoring.
Yeah.
And he gets happier when he scores and the team scores, from what it looks like from the outside anyway.
Yeah.
He's strong. He's fast. He's got an eye for goal every time.
Oh, yeah.
So what else do you want in a 9?
You'd want him in that position.
Exactly right.
He's so good in the air. He can jump so high with headers, with bicycles, and I think he fits that perfectly, and I think he has turned into that 9 role quite well, I think.
Look, I mean, there's other names to be thrown around. We've got Jimmy Greaves.
I've got one.
Let me give a couple. Jimmy Greaves, Kempes, the one in the 78 World Cup. He's considered a 9, even though he had a 10 on his jersey, but he's considered a 9.
Yep.
There's a little-known player called Fernando Pedro Teo, who played for Sporting in the 40s. He's got the best goal average, I think, ever. He's scored 1.68
Wow.
goals per game.
Yeah.
That's 331 goals in 187 games. So another one that we haven't spoken about yet is Paolo Rossi. So
Yeah.
he played in the 82 World Cup and he was a top goal scorer. The reason why I didn't include him in the best is he was, I wouldn't say lucky, but he wasn't favourites to even go into the Italy squad in that World Cup, and he didn't do too well into the last 3 or 4 games, last 3 games of the tournament either. So he's remembered for that. He's remembered for that tournament,
Yeah.
but overall in his career, it's not at the same level as the
Some
guys
of
that
these
we're
guys.
speaking of.
Oh, yeah.
You got other couple of Real Madrid players. You got Hugo Sanchez. You got
Mm.
Emilio
Butragueño.
Putragueño. So there's different players as well that are worth mentioning, but in my opinion, are not up to the level of the guys that we discussed. I know you've got a name in mind that you want to bring up, Darcy.
Yeah, one name I'll bring up. I don't know if you guys thought about it. Mario Jardel.
Oh.
Yeah, he was a quality, typical target man. I think back in the
The guy that played for Newcastle here in Australia.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of people here remember him for those 11 games out in Newcastle where he was overweight and didn't even have a pair of boots when he came to this country. They had to take him to Paul's warehouse. They picked him up from the airport. No joke. But aside from that, we're talking about here when he was way past the back in his prime. He was a typical target man striker, number 9, where tall, strong, great in the air. He had a great header on him, and he was particularly in his Porto days. And then he went to Galatasaray, scored many goals, and then back to Portugal with Sporting Lisbon. He won the Golden Shoe 2 years in 99.
So you bring him up. This is what I find interesting.
But
you bring him up.
yeah,
Someone like Jardel, who it's not a household name. You bring him up before someone like Miroslav Klose.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, look, I think, like I said, Jardel won the Golden Shoe 2 years in 99 and 2002.
Isn't Klose the top goal scorer in the World Cup history now?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I
Absolutely.
think, and Klose, not taking anything away from him, but I think one person, I think Klose was your great number 9. He was there, right place, right time, goal poacher more. But Jardel, for me, he was just your typical target man. Like I said, great in the air, strong, great finisher, and did his job.
I think that's the funny thing about the topic is you could throw any name out there, but then anyone could say, yeah, but what about this guy as well? We didn't talk enough about maybe Crespo, like you mentioned him with his partnership with Batistuta, and we didn't talk enough about a couple of other, big strikers. Fernando Morientes played really well for Real Madrid for a number of years as that classic striker. With every player you bring up, you could always bring up 3 or 4.
Yeah.
George Weah, 100%. That's
African player to win the Ballon d'Or. Man.
No, 100%. And I think, when we spoke about teams influencing your performance, the player I had in mind was Batistuta.
Yeah.
If Batistuta played for Real Madrid for 5 years, could he have been something completely different to what we remember him as today because of that influence around him? I mean, it's a what if. We would never know.
Yeah.
We don't have the answer.
Yeah.
But it goes to show that he played in Fiorentina, and I may be wrong, but I think he even played in Serie B with Fiorentina. I think he went down a division and he came back up.
Yeah.
So he stuck around with them.
Yeah.
Imagine during that time if he was at a place like Juventus or Real Madrid or Barcelona, his name or his legacy would be different. So does that influence how we judge him as a 9?
When you're talking strictly about the number 9, maybe not, because we are just referring to goal scoring ability, style of play, etc. I do think it hurts his career somewhat, only because, look, unfortunately, he didn't win much until his season with Roma, where winning the Serie A. However, at the same time, it's so hard to criticize loyalty, and I love Fiorentina. Yeah, but you're spot on. When they got relegated, he loved Florence so much that he wanted to stay to try to get him back up to the top flight. So, to me, it sometimes with certain players, it enhances their legacy. And I believe this is the case for Batistuta.
Yeah, maybe if he went to a bigger club, he would just been just another number amongst a group of stars. He wouldn't have been the standout as he was with Roma when he won the Scudetto in 2001. And with the years in Fiorentina, where you think of Fiorentina and I think of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. To finish off, and it might be a bit of a difficult one, can you give me a top 5 9s of all time?
I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go with the ones that I've watched in particular order.
Number 5.
Number 5, I'm going to say Alan Shearer.
Yep, 4.
Number 4, I'm going to say Ruud van Nistelrooy.
Wow, anyways. I don't expect that. Number 3.
Number 3.
Oh, come on, man.
Time.
The clock's ticking. 5.
Thierry
4.
Henry.
Take a breath, mate. All
Thierry
right.
Henry.
So now, next one.
Number 2, I'm going to say Shevchenko.
Number 1.
Ronaldo, R9.
Cool. Akram, 5.
All right. So on the clock. Clock starts now. I think I like to think about Alan Shearer, number 5. I think number 4, Shevchenko. I think 3, I would probably put. Someone like maybe Thierry Henry. Number 2, Romario. Number 1, Ronaldo.
Johnny?
I'm going to be a little bit different here. Number 5, Batistuta. Number 4, Henry. Number 3, Van Basten. Number 2, Ronaldo. And I'm going to go number 1, Pele. I know you guys mentioned him not as a 9, but to me, he's a target man.
Fair call.
And to be honest, if you push me a little bit harder, Cristiano will be top 2 or 3 as well.
Yeah.
If you wait 5-10 years from now and he retires, we might consider him in there.
100%. I think the only argument for Cristiano Ronaldo would be that, like, for most of his career, he played on the left wing. But I totally see where you're coming from. And for the many years as a left wing, he did kind of drift into that space more often than not. So while he might have started the game on the left wing, he certainly didn't always play there. No.
And that's it for today, guys. Thank you once again. Check out footballretro.com and we'll see you next time. See you later.